Confident living, banner of might, comes from the Spirit with glorious light. Confident living cleanses my soul, giving the Spirit fullest control. Confident living rights every wrong. Dynamic power.
I'm Mike Costello, and I'd like to take the next few minutes to talk to you about transforming fear in your life. All of us have fears, every one of us, and it doesn't matter where they come from. They all come from the past. We all have them. And the fears of our lives paralyze us and keep us from enjoying the experience of life, keep us from coming to a newness of thought, keep us from progressing, keep us from peace and happiness, and in many cases, keep us from health. So fear is an extremely disruptive force in our lives. It has been said that a definition of fear is the letters themselves in the word, F-E-A-R, false evidence appearing real. False evidence appearing real. False evidence appearing real. It seems that in our minds, we have in and from the past come to create fears that are for the most part based upon false evidence. And the evidence is some experience that we've had from the past. One example that I give often in our church is that we experience fear simply because of some decision or thought or expression that we have had in the past, and most of them come from long ago. One that we can think of is a trip to the dentist. Every one of us immediately has a feeling about a trip to the dentist. When we're young people, and maybe when we're not so young, many of us have fear of a trip to the doctor. And I can think of more than one time hearing a parent say to a child, if you don't behave, I'm going to take you to the doctor and they'll give you a shot. The idea that that shot is going to be punishment. And so in our life, we have all of these experiences of getting a shot that stay with us. And it may be a little twinge of something, it may be a little bit of pain, or it may be a great deal of pain. But something happened in the past that has caused within us fear. In some expressions of our life and in some circumstances, it is things that we fear that we have never even experienced, but someone told us or we came to believe that these are things to be feared. One might be poverty. Some of us have never lived in poverty, and yet we have a dire fear of it. Some of us have never had serious or life-threatening illnesses, but we have a fear of it. Some of us have never been alone, but we have a fear in some cases of being alone. And so this being fearful has to do with a decision that we made in the past. In New Thought, we say so often that we live in our minds and not in the world. The way that we think, the way that you think, and the way that I think about life, about the experiences of life, determine how I feel about life. And there is a direct and real correlation between what I think and what I feel. And if we think fear, if fear is in our mind in any way, shape, or form, then that fear creates within us a feeling. And that feeling creates within us an anticipation of pain or suffering or loss or hurt. But remember the definition that I gave you a few minutes ago, false evidence appearing real. Just because you got a shot as a child and it hurt doesn't mean that that shot is going to hurt this time. Just because something happened in the past in your life that caused you pain or suffering doesn't mean that you are going to go through pain and suffering this time, in this present moment. It doesn't mean that the pain will necessarily go away or that the hurt won't be there, but so often our fears are related to the experience of the moment or to the information that we have. And as I said before, these have to do with decisions that we've made in the past. These are decisions that have come into our thought processes from something that's happened in the past. Going back to that trip to the dentist, whether the dentist ever hurt you or not, You heard stories about dentists that hurt people. You heard stories about what happens when teeth are pulled or teeth are filled. You had a toothache in the past, and so you identify with that pain. You identify with that experience, and so that fear creeps in and becomes a part of your mental makeup. It becomes a part of the process of your mind. It begins to paralyze you. It begins to create within your thought processes information that may not be true today as it was in the past. What we really do with fears is we terrorize ourselves, and we continue to terrorize ourselves over and over and over again as we allow fear to be a part of our life, and as we allow the fears of this or that to become a part of our life. I would invite you to examine your life and decide what it is that you fear, and whether the things that you fear are real and valid, or whether they are just ideas that are planted in your conscious and subconscious mind. And as you do that, examine how it is your mind operates and how real it is that that fear is really going to come to pass. And if it does come to pass, are you aware and do you realize that there is a power and a resource within you that can empower and strengthen you to deal with that circumstance and situation that you fear? As we're talking about fears and the fact that fears come to us from decisions that we've made long ago, we need to go back into this statement that we make so often, and we've made in this program as well, that we live in our minds and not in the world, and that the mind is the most creative force in the universe. That mind is what calls everything into being. There's nothing in this world, seen or unseen, that was not thought, that was not a product of mind before it became to be a reality. The camera that I'm talking into right now, the television that you're watching right now, the chair in which you're sitting right now, all of those things were thought before they became manifest. Think about that for a moment. There is nothing in this world, nothing in your life that was not created by thought. It is thought that comes first, and then from the thought comes the ideation or the creative force to do something. As with the television that you're watching, someone had a vision, an idea of that television before it came to be. From that idea, they drew plans and did studies and tested their theories and ideas. And then from those thoughts, they were able to create a blueprint. And from that blueprint, others, engineers and others, were able to come together, and they were able to build that which was an idea before it was a reality in matter or in substance. That's true of everything. And if, in fact, thought is the most creative force in the universe, the most creative force that exists, then think what happens when our mind is built upon fear, and when that fear becomes a part of our process of mind, and when that fear becomes the creative force. In the book of Job, there's a simple statement that Job made, and we all know, those of us who went to Sunday school, the terrible life and the horrible things that happened to Job. And Job said, that which I have feared has come into my life, has come to be. The things that we fear most come into our lives, and that's because the dynamic of mind is constantly creating and recreating in and of itself from its own substance. And so we need to be very vigilant. We need to be very aware of the fact that when we create in mind, we are going to create a manifestation in life. Whatever it is you think in your mind, whatever thought that goes on in your mind in the process of consciousness and thought is going to be manifest in life. And if your mind is filled with fear, if you're constantly afraid, then what you're going to bring about is that very thing that you fear the most. Very thing. I don't want to simplify things, nor do I want to categorize diseases or the cause of diseases, but if you think to yourself about the number of people that you've known that have been deathly afraid of a given disease, whether it be heart disease or cancer, people who fear it the most in their lives, many of those people manifest that disease. It comes into being in their life. So often people who fear poverty end up living in poverty because it is that creative force within their mind that brings about that which is resident in the mind process and is created in the outer world or in the world of substance or material life. How do we change this? We need to stop terrorizing ourselves. We need to release ourselves from those things which we fear. We need to make a decision. We need to decide in our minds to change our way of thinking, to change our thought processes, and thereby change our lives. We live in our minds and not in the world. If you can learn to change your mind, you can learn to change the way that you feel about the things that you used to think you knew and you used to think were true. Make a decision to give up fear. Make a decision to give up false evidence. Make a decision to give up the decisions that you made in the past long ago that continue to terrorize and to hurt you. You do that by beginning to make friends with life. Make friends with the world in which we live. Maybe your life is not the way you want it to be. Maybe things aren't going the way that you had planned. But if you can make friends with life, if you can believe that there is a divine power in this universe that is working together with you to bring about the manifestation of experience as you need it for your growth, if you could come to trust life, to believe in life, to embrace life, then your thought processes begin to change and you begin to make a decision to trust God, to trust Spirit, to trust yourself, to trust life, and your decision is on the way to being made. Your decision to change your mind, to change your way of thinking, and to change the way you feel about life. All of this is based upon trust. Trust in the fact that there is a divine order to this universe. There is a divine order to your life and to my life in the midst of every circumstance and situation. And there is one power in this universe. And whether we call that power God or infinite intelligence or divine mind or the Holy Spirit or whatever it is that you choose in your faith tradition to call that infinite intelligence, that divine spirit, that presence of God, that there is one power and there is one presence, and that one power and one presence sustains and embraces all of life, and that includes you, and that includes me. And because there is one power, and because there is one presence, we can be friends with life. We can make friends with life. We can stop terrorizing ourselves. We can make a decision to change our way of thinking, and we can release ourselves from the fears of the past and the fears of things that we've not yet experienced. Transform the fears of your life into the belief in your life. Transform the fears in your life to the victories in your life. Transform the fears in your life by changing the way that you think, and allow fear to melt away, and in its place come the presence and the power of one power and one presence in your mind, allowing your mind to change its way of thinking, to change its way of behaving, and thereby change the way that you feel about life. So in the next few days, set aside some time, look at what it is that you fear, and allow those things that you fear to be put aside in place of the presence and the power of God, who will guide and direct you to deal with circumstances and situations, will protect you from those things that you believe can defeat you, and will transform your fears into victory and friendship with life and with all the beings around you. We believe in prayer as a centering force, and we'd like to pause at this point in the program and invite you to join with us in a reflection. Eternal and loving God, we gather our hearts and minds together in the presence of your divine light, and we know that fears paralyze and rob us of those things that we want for a full and happy and prosperous life. We invite your presence into our thoughts and into our mind, and we know that as you enter the process of mind, that we can embrace your divine intelligence, guidance, and love, and that you are waiting and willing to be a participant with us in the joys and happiness of life. We know these things in the name of faith, the name of hope, and the name of love. Amen.
Those were wonderful admonitions and suggestions you made toward living a positive life.
Really important, and I think it's important for all of us to examine what our fears are.
Yes.
And examine the little fears in life, but the big fears, I'm amazed at how many people really don't believe that this world is very stable. I'm constantly amazed. And I think it comes from the fact that so many of us believe that the world is by nature an evil place, or that there's a constant, I think from traditionalists, there's a constant battle between God and the devil going on. But this idea that the world is just a bad place, filled with bad things. And we become so preoccupied with that. And I think that we also, many of us, become preoccupied with the fact that we believe what we see on the news, or we believe what the naysayers are saying about what's going to happen in the future.
And we can do that and just be bogged down in fear and negativity, or we can live a more positive life, as you suggested. And we can remember, too, that fear is simply convoluted negative thinking, and we can therefore change our thoughts, as you pointed out so well. We can transmute those negative thoughts into positive thoughts. And in a sense, we need to be aware of our negative thoughts and the fear that we are filled with, and transmute it, because we have to recognize it before we can change it.
That's key. We have to recognize it, and we have to stop allowing ourselves to enter into these fears again and again. And I think the statement I used was stop terrorizing ourselves. And I think we do. We terrorize ourselves.
Yes. But we can, as a great teacher taught years ago, to look at the worst thing that could happen, decide what we would do to alleviate the problem, and then go on with our lives. And that's very good advice. And I know I taught a series of classes for a school here in Long Beach, and we taught women, it was a modeling self-improvement school, to study themselves, change all they can that they wish to, and then forget themselves. And that advice is very good, because we can apply it to the things you covered in your talk, that to just eliminate the negative aspect, but to accept that this is a part of our life. Not everything is perfect and positive, because we wouldn't have everything is balanced. So if we accept the fact that some things are not going to be to our liking, but we have every opportunity in the world to change those the way we wish to.
And as we change our minds, the other thing I think is important is so many of our fears will never come to pass.
Exactly.
And they have no basis in reality. I have a fear. We all have fears. I don't like snakes, and many people don't like snakes. I just don't like them. Now, the likelihood, I live in Long Beach, and I probably will for the rest of my life, the likelihood of my coming across a snake is next to none. But I could allow that fear to constantly overpower me. And so there are some kinds of mundane fears that I think we need to realize are just a part of our psyche and our psychological makeup and our mind process. And those fears just I wouldn't spend a lot of time working on trying to get over my fear of snakes. But if I had a fear of going out in public, or if I had a fear of driving a car, or if I had a fear of poverty or losing my job, or whatever it is that my fear might be, those are fears that I think we need to work at, and we need to work at freeing ourselves from.
Yes. Well, we need to look and see what caused that fear, and then face it, whatever the fear might be. And if you use the subject of snakes, well, I remember once being in a building on the farm in Kentucky, and I looked up and there was a black snake curled down toward me. Well, I left that building in a hurry, and I was afraid, deathly afraid of snakes forever. But I was visiting a couple who had a 12-year-old boy, and the boy had a snake, a tame snake that he was letting wrap around his arm. And he said, and like you, I was deathly afraid of snakes. So he said to me, "Would you like to hold the snake?" And my first impulse was say, "Get lost, forget it." But I said, yes, I would. And in a sense, I did want to, because I wanted to see how it felt to not be fearful. Because what was there to fear? This little green snake that was about 2 feet long or more. So it wrapped itself around my arm, and it didn't feel like anything but just something wrapped around my arm. So I wasn't as afraid after that. The same thing happened with almost drowning. When I was 16, I almost drowned I was rescued, and I lived, obviously, but time went on until I was in my early 40s, and I was in a lake, and the canoe capsized, and I thought I would drown, but for just a second. And then I realized everyone else dog paddles, everyone else stays afloat. Why can't I? And so I did. And you know, that broke my fear of water. So I would say from experience that if we face whatever it is we're fearful of, it, whether it's not, lack of funds or lack of whatever, or a fear of objects, any object, then to face it is the way.
And yes, absolutely, face that fear. And then it's a little bit like falling off a horse or
Yes.
whatever they say, get back on the horse. Tremendous strength in that advice, because by facing our fears, and just as you experienced with the green snake. Now I've never come to that point, but you came to a point of understanding that that snake was not going to harm you, and that the fear that you had was unfounded.
Yes.
Now obviously, that doesn't mean that you would pick up a rattlesnake.
No,
Because there are some
hopefully.
healthy fears that we have in life, which are really made to protect us.
Yes.
But the other fears that I think are just tremendously devastating to us, and again, I don't want to talk about a disease particularly, but if I think back in my life of the people who were deathly afraid of contracting cancer, for instance, or heart disease, or some other ailment of kind, and the number of people who do in fact contract that disease.
Yes.
And I think that comes to be confirmation of just the understanding that we have of the power of mind, and how our minds can, in fact, be creative, and that they can call into being some of these experiences. And
Well-
I'm not at all suggesting that everyone with cancer has called that into their being. And I want to be real
Of
clear
course
about
not.
that. So,
Of course not. But too often we do call into our being whatever it is that we feared. Then, as you use the example of Job, what he feared came upon him and did indeed devastate him. But he stuck it out and was victorious. And we can all do the same thing. Because another thing, we have, regardless of what religious faith we have, most people have some kind of root religious belief, something to hold on to in a spiritual way. And if they don't, then they need to find something, some way of relating to God in a personal way. Because if we're faith-filled, we're not going to really be fearful. We can dislike certain things like snakes or whatever, just dislike being around them, and they're not pleasant to us. But we won't really lose sleep over it. It won't affect our health pattern, because we know that we're protected if we have the faith.
and I think that statement that you made is very important, and we need to go back to it, and that is having a personal relationship with God.
Yeah.
And I think in New Thought, so often we talk about God as a principle,
Yeah.
and people are cautious about this personal relationship. And certainly we're not talking about any kind of a fundamentalist personal relationship, because that's not part of our tradition. But to have a personal relationship between ourselves and our Creator, the divine, is so infinitely important.
Yeah. And that's what religion, that's what churchianity should do for individuals. It should strengthen that personal tie that each individual has with Creator God, because we are indeed co-creators with Creator God. And some might say I'm blaspheming to say that, but we are. And your talk just now showed that, yes, indeed, we do create through our own thoughts. Whatever it is we create, whatever it is that we're surrounded with, we have created that one way or another. And sometimes we create those things because we've come in to learn specific lessons. And so that's why we can't be judgmental of other people, because we don't know what lessons they came to learn. So whatever occurs in anyone else's life or our own, we just have to accept, well, that person did create that, and it was for a specific reason. And let's hope they're victorious in overcoming that.
And that victorious overcoming comes when they change their way of thinking.
Yes, yes, so that they're thinking in a positive way, knowing they can overcome whatever it is, whether it's a physical illness or lack of funds or a relationship, whatever it might work, whatever it might be. If we have faith in God enough, we know that we're helped. We know that we're aided in whatever it is we're trying to do. And I know that you and I have seen that happen in our own lives, and we've been victorious in that way. And everyone faces problems in life. Everyone faces the death of people they love. Everyone faces lack of funds. I mean, people who are very wealthy face lack of funds, because if they lose a little of their money, then they've lost a lot to them. So whatever our circumstances are in life, it hits us in an individual way. But if we don't have faith in a divine creator, divine providence, then we can't really have that much faith in ourselves, when enough faith in ourselves when the chips are down and we really need it.
Mhm. And having that faith is just tremendously important and empowering. And I think we need to really understand that that faith is accessible to us, or that presence is accessible to us. One practical example that I can think of that people are challenged with all the time is most people are afraid of losing their jobs.
Yes.
They're afraid of losing their jobs because attached to their job is their livelihood, their personhood in many cases, their credibility, and a variety of other things, their self-worth. But why is it that we fear losing our job? We fear losing our job because we fear that we can't get another one. When in fact, if we lose this job, whatever our job is, there's another one available to us. It isn't that there aren't enough jobs to go
Yeah.
around. The fact is that there are jobs. And what we need to do is to know and understand that what we need will be attracted to us, that we will be guided and directed in the places and to the places where we need to be. And if we lose our job, we lose our job.
Yeah, and if we're adventurous and enjoy change and welcome change, then we think, well, that's going to be wonderful because something new will happen. I know my children have taught me a lot of lessons, and my younger son, when he first started to school, was going to be held back one year if he didn't shape up. And I told him that his teacher had said that. And he said, and I said, he says, oh, good, I'll have all new friends.
Mhm. There's a wonderful way to look at
Yes.
life, or to look at a situation. We have a wonderful lady who plays the organ in our church. We
Yeah,
know her well, and
yeah.
I do as well. And she had come to a point in time where she decided she shouldn't be driving her car anymore.
Mhm.
And so she stopped driving her car, and she came to church one day and she said, "Oh, Pastor Mike, I'm just so happy I've got rid of my car." And yet, so many older people have come to me and said, "Oh, Pastor Mike, I'm going to
Oh,
have to get rid of my car. I don't know what I'm going to do. It's going to be terrible." But her view was that even though I can't have this car anymore, it doesn't have to do with my ability to get around. It doesn't have to do with changing my lifestyle. It just means that now I don't have to spend all the money that I was spending on my car. So it's the way she looked at life.
yeah. And she saw the overall picture
Mhm.
clearly. And people can actually, if they don't go very often, can hire taxis far less expensively than they can pay insurance and car bills.
Absolutely. And so we don't know really, when experiences come into our life, whether they're coming to teach us something, or whether they're coming, and as they are in most cases, to bring us to a new place that's better than the place where we were. Dr. Freelander and I have been sharing with you some concepts and ideas on transforming the fears of your life into constructive forces. And we hope that you found this information useful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Confident living, banner of might, comes from the Spirit with glorious light. Confident living cleanses my soul, giving the Spirit fullest control. Confident living rights every wrong. Dynamic power helps me be strong. Confident living comforts my heart. From such a blessing I can't depart. Confident living helps me expand visions of value, the kingdom at hand.